Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. I am Jairus Days, coming to you from the studio at Techtown. It is Tuesday, February 13th, 2024, and across the table from me here, Fletcher Sharpe. Fletcher, are you ready for Valentine's Day? It is but a day away.
I'm going to say yes, just in case Nicole happens to hear this. Yes.
He is so ready. Did you know how many presents he's got?
Don't do that. I'm gonna get in so much trouble when I show her, like, I did the dishes.
So you're an acts of service guy.
Yeah, I mean, I might stop by Bon. I have to do something because I have a soccer game that night, so I'm not going to even be home.
If you've got the coin, actually, I haven't tried, but I saw through the window in Parker's Alley, I saw the John Kung collaboration where it's like 15 ones that include all kinds of crazy flavors, just as a thought.
I will take note of that.
I'm here to help people. Speaking of being of service to people, let's get into the news. And today it's all about sports. Specifically, I watched the Super Bowl on Sunday night, and I couldn't help but think, Fletcher, that there were some lessons the Lions could take from this, because there's a good chance the Lions could have been in this game. Let's be honest. Like, statistically, it could have happened. But I also looked at that game and went, there are places where the Lions could really improve, or some things that are maybe we've been unfair to the Lions. I've got one. Fletcher, why don't you start?
I'll say this. I did not watch the game in its entirety. I watched parts of it, and then I watched highlights to fill in the gaps I did not see. But from what I saw in the live form, and this is probably going to be a bit far-fetched of a reach and probably, make some people irrationally happy and sad, but I just took the first half of that game, the Lions would be halfway from winning a Super Bowl.
100%.
Because the Chiefs didn't play great. The 49ers played worse. And a lot of people I know through grief were like, the 49ers got lucky against the Lions. They kind of did. Like, a lot of their big plays that happened, like, some of them were skillful plays, but, like, a lot of them were just ball bounces off someone's face mask into a receiver's hands. His cornerback drops a very easy interception. Someone should be making an open field tackle and instead gets stiff-armed to the seventh ring of hell. So, like, yeah, these things are things that, like, typically don't happen, and they happen in that moment. And someone was even like, the 49ers used up all their luck against the Lions, and, like, now they have to just out-grit the Chiefs, which they did not late on. And Patrick Mahomes, I think he's 3 for 3 Super Bowl championships, Super Bowl MVPs. Like, that's an amazing statistic. Not to get too far off the Lions, I know in 2019, someone's like, he's passed for 40% of Troy Aikman's touchdowns and 8% of the games. And Troy Aikman is like, let me know when he gets to 33% of my Super Bowl rings. And in 3 years, he's already caught up to him. Troy Aikman played 11 years in the league. Pat Mahomes has played 6. So he might be looking at the next great quarterback in the league, which the Lions will have to overcome. But back to the game, there are a few things the Lions probably could have taken, I guess, defensively, in terms of just properly executing. But they're simple things. They're not things we haven't mentioned before, like staying in coverage the entire way, wrapping up when you make tackles, finishing the play, like not hitting someone and thinking they're down and, releasing and they run away. Offensively, not really much to take. A few plays where Brock Purdy, did what he did against the Lions, and unfortunately for him, it did not work out in the same way. Throwing the ball against your body, don't do that. Making risky throws you don't need to. It was like a football game. I know everyone wants to fix it on halftime and who was in the stands, but, like, the first half was sloppy. The second half was more entertaining. They got to overtime. There are a few moments where I personally feel a little vindicated. I would definitely feel so if I were Dan Campbell. Late, the 49ers, 4th and 3, decided to go for it, and they converted, and people were talking about Kyle Shanahan's real gutsy. Look at him making the gutsy call in the play. And I was like, literally just 2 weeks ago, they were calling Dan Campbell an idiot for doing the same exact thing. I've always said it'd be one thing if the play was a bad play call and it just went terrible, but it was a great play call, and then the ball just got dropped, just easily got dropped. So at that point, it's like, you made the right call. It didn't work out. Okay, move on. So to see Kyle Shanahan lauded as this guru of just gutsy was just funny. And then to see them later on decide to go for the field goal twice and end up losing as a result. I was told that going for the field goal help ensures you win. So I don't know which it is, whether it's, 6 in one hand or a dozen in the other, but I just think it's very funny how quickly people switch the script when it's someone else.
I think that's because his last name's Shanahan. You know what I mean? Like, that's why they do that, which is completely unfair in my mind. But I think that's why.
You want to go off the last name Shanahan. The other Shanahan at least has 2 Super Bowl rings. This one has been the Super Bowl twice and blown double-digit leads twice. So, like, I don't know, man. Like, I mean, I hear that, but also, like, at some point, that's got to stop.
So my points that I saw, one, you got to take care of your deep corners. The defense on both sides was able to handle those deep balls in a lot of cases that I worry that right now, as the Lions stand, they wouldn't be able to defend against. And two, this just reinforces the point, all the kicking in that game, the 2 record field goals. Look, if you're going to be an elite team and if you have the ability to score from 50 yards out, you have to have that in your toolbox. And there's no reason to not have a really good kicker. It's finding the guy and paying the guy. So those were my 2 takeaways out of it. And I co-sign on the points about Campbell. Even though I questioned some of his decisions, it was definitely a double standard applied by the press there on that one.
The hardest part about finding a good kicker is like finding one who's consistent. I know the Oakland Raiders caught some flack when they drafted Sebastian Janikowski in the 3rd round. They're like, what are you doing drafting a kicker that high? That's crazy. And then he went on to be like the most consistent player for them for like the next 12 or so years. You don't want to like go too high on a kicker, but like you need someone who you can definitely count on. And it's hard because when you try to like sign a free agent and go from there, like you end up sometimes getting someone who's great, sometimes getting someone who works out slightly. But for the same people who are like kicking a field goals automatic, like this isn't Jason Hansen, this is not Matt Prater. These are not kickers that you know their names already. Like I'm sure most people had to Google the Lions kicker's name up until the last game they played, because they had never seen him on the field that much. Having a weapon like that definitely helps, but like finding it is kind of...
Well, we got to do better than what we have.
Oh, for sure.
Or give him super serum.
That technically would be well, actually, you know what? I don't know if it's the same chemical breakup as a steroid, so you might...
Does super serum count under the rules? I'm curious about that. Doctors chime in.
It doesn't have the HGH thing, but also it'll be very apparent when he kicks a ball and like it hits someone in the stands and kills them. So I don't know.
Before we leave the Lions and move on to the Panthers, this just in, the Lions are tied for 5th with the Bengals for the best odds of the Lombardi Trophy in 2024. Thoughts on that? So tied for 5th, and that's an amazing ranking for the Lions from no one would believe you 3 years ago.
I was looking at ESPN. They ranked every team and their chance likelihood to get back, and they had like a way too early power ranking, and ESPN had the Lions at 4. And they said the thing they need to do, their offense was running pretty well, is retain who they can in the offense, but defensively they need to figure out how to get some extra pressure on the quarterback if you're not going to have better corners, or get better back-end protection in your secondary. So if you're not going to get pressure, at least that you can keep their people covered, which is very much a fair thing. The linebacking core, if you would have told me 4 years ago Alex Anzalone would be like a mainstay, I would have probably kicked you in the face. But to see that, like, they're saying he's someone you need to try to hold on to as a, maybe not the star linebacker, but someone who's there who always finds contact, always finds a player, top 3 in tackles almost every season. I'll admit, I was very much get him away from this team. Even the beginning of the season I was. But to find out that he's someone that people think they should keep I was wrong.
Could the kicker Badgley improve? Because this is what we've been harping on. We didn't want to call out the name, but like, could it be a similar story?
The problem with kickers, it's unfair. But like it's also just, it is what it is. Being a kicker is a physical thing on the field for sure, but it's also a very mental one. The kicker for the Bills who went wide right, I know after they lost that game, like his mental health just like plummeted. I don't know exactly how his career turned out after, but I do know for the next few months after, it was a very hard time for him to be anywhere near Buffalo because people just gave him grief. So you have to find someone who's mentally prepared. I don't know Michael Badgley's backstory. I don't know. I would find it very hard to believe he'll be on the roster next year. I feel like if they bring in a kicker who can at least hit some from 50 consistently, he's probably gone. He could improve, but increasing your leg strength at this point of your career is hard. And if you do by like a substantial amount, like they're probably saying, hey, sir, let's come test your P real quick. You were kicking at a max of 50 yards last year. Now you're doing 60. Step in the office real quick. We got a little meeting for you. It's kind of hard to see. I don't want them to draft unless, they really need to do so. But I would look at who is high in the Lou Groza Award, which is the award for the best kickers in college. See who's a finalist, see who won, compare their numbers, and maybe grab one of those guys.
Now, I saw you walk into the studio with the Michigan Panthers bag, and that shows off that you went to their kind of kickoff thing over the weekend. The Michigan Panthers are kind of a retro fan favorite in Detroit because this town is obsessed, top to bottom, with football. So you went, got some details. What do we need to know about the Panther season? I do know that the leagues merged with another league, and now it's owned. The league is in part owned by The Rock, so that gets my attention. But yeah, what's going on?
Yeah, they merged with the WWE, founded and backed XFL, which I remember the old XFL when it came around. It was really cool because it was like not your dad's football. They had a halo rule for fair catching and punts. So, like, if you're within 5 yards, it's a penalty so that they don't get destroyed. But outside of that, and some of the things from the XFL, like, carried over to the NFL, like post-game press conferences with the players where, like, the microphone was hooked to the whole stadium. So, like, when they said something back, the whole stadium could hear what they were saying. I remember the quarterback for the New York, New Jersey Hitmen was, like, super unpopular, and, like, he just cussed out the fans, and all the fans heard it, and they just kept booing him loudly. But the XFL also had it where, like, you had nicknames in the back of the jersey, so it wasn't a name. So, like, Rod Smart, who played for the Panthers, played for the Jets. He was known as He Hate Me.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
And, like, it was just like, this is what they did in, like, youth football. This was really cool. And it was one of the few leagues where, like, some players could have numbers that fell between 1 and 10 as, like, a skill player as opposed to just the quarterbacks having them. But it's no longer that. It's a more professional. Vince McMahon brought it back, and he's like, I don't want any more of that riff-raff.
So we know Vince has kind of exited stage left with some controversies lately.
Yeah, that's why him saying no riff-raff is very funny.
Yeah, it's real funny because, yeah.
But The Rock has stepped in, and he technically owns, I think, half of every team in the league. Looking at Wikipedia, I know some have 50% of him. I know some have Redbird instead.
Including one of the teams is the San Antonio Brahmas, which is like the definition of Rock branding.
Yeah. What I did learn is if you liked the practices at Eastern Michigan that the Panthers had, those won't be happening anymore. Every team will be practicing in Arlington, Texas, and then flying out to their respective home stadiums for the weekend, which let me believe two things. One, I don't think that's very smart for engagement with fans. But two, there's a lot of money there. That's not a cheap thing to have, like, at least just using Michigan, to have your team fly down to Arlington, Texas, practice for 3 or 4 days, and then fly back to Detroit, and then fly back to Arlington, Texas for practice. Like, that lets me know, like, there's some money in that for sure.
Fans love watching practices of the Lions and all that other stuff. That's a decision I would hope they would reconsider down the line.
Yeah, the fans at the town hall meeting were not thrilled. They were asking the head coach. Mike Nolan mentioned it kind of as like a little bit of a throwaway thing where he's like, oh, you know, this isn't happening here. And like 6 people stood up like, I have a question about that. And they were like drilling him. In my head, I'm like, he's not in charge of He's not in charge of that. And people were kind of pulling up some false equivalencies. Like, what if I want to go to like White Castle and I want to see Frank Jinda behind me? Like, look at my linebacker ordering hamburgers. I'm like, he's a professional athlete. He's not at White Castle. Unless he's on a cleanse, I assure you he's not at White Castle.
I don't know. I mean, Jason Kelsey does go to McDonald's on the regular, but he's getting like
Jason Kelsey is an offensive lineman. They need to be bulked up. That's different. Frank Ginda is a linebacker. He does not need White Castle in his body. I assure you he does not. Also going away, if you enjoyed the cheerleaders, those are going away as the XFL did not have cheerleaders. That was also a hot topic for fans. There was an old lady who was very upset. I was actually stunned. It was an old lady who was upset, but she was, again, grilling Mike Nolan, like, and what's up with the cheerleaders? Why are you taking them away? They really got the fans involved. That's how people found out about your games, is they'd go to malls and whatever, and the cheerleaders would be there, and they'd be dancing, and they'd be like, you want some tickets to a game? And then you'd get to see them and learn about them and grow. There's some really great things, but the 2 things that really stood out the most to most of the people there were the fact that the engagement drops a bit because the XFL had a different plan, because their owner is taking over as half the owner of the league. It's got to make things more equal, but it sounds like in the future they're going to try to implement more things to like get everyone back connected.
Talk about the highlights. What are the good parts?
They're excited about the offense. I mean, I know that fan favorite Reggie Corbin is stepping away from football. Someone asked about him. He talked to Mike Nolan. Mike said that he said, honestly, I'm getting to be 27, 28, 29. I'm reaching up there. A little bit banged up. People don't really want a banged up running back. He didn't get picked in the dispersal draft, and he's like, yeah, I think I'm good. So that's unfortunate, but they're really excited about the triple-headed running backs they have back there. They got one person from another rival team. They drafted 2 high picks and running backs as well. Really excited about that. They're excited about Detroit and Michigan still being a part of the league. The executive they brought up there, Jim Pop, he has some ties to Michigan, but he made sure to be the guy to come up there because it was one of the more vocal and engaging teams in the league.
Couple of points with that. Wasn't the Panthers one of the more popular USFL teams? And not all the USFL teams made it because there's only 8 teams: Birmingham, Houston, Memphis, Michigan, Arlington, DC, San Antonio, and St. Louis. So Michigan making the cut, I think, is important in that.
When I heard they were merging, I knew it already, that just from all the love that the league was showing to Michigan, that Michigan was fine. I know Philadelphia didn't make it. There are a few Philadelphia fans and people who worked for the team who actually came to the town hall to talk. Philadelphia and Detroit used to share the Ford Field. Like when they had to share stadiums, they shared Ford Field together. So to see that they were there and like talking cordially and like, wishing the Panthers success, that's good. Like you want to see stuff like that. They're excited for the upcoming season. They're excited for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's involvement. I know a few journalists there had a lot of questions about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and they're like, we don't really know his full involvement. We know he's excited to be here. We know he's excited to get started. They gave away 2 raffle tickets for some on-field excitement things before games to some people there, and the people who won them seemed to be very pleased. I'm excited for the Panthers season. They made the playoffs last year. Obviously, they finished with an under 500 record, but they still made the playoffs. Coach Mike Nolan said that was actually one of the more indelible moments in his coaching career, was hearing how loud Ford Field got for that last game, even like knowing we struggled at home, seeing how people came out and were really supportive and got behind the team, and when it became apparent we were going to win, how loud the stadium got. That's something that I for sure was like a scrapbook memory for him. So that's great to hear as well.
I think anything that The Rock touches, people are going to pay attention to. And I will put this out as an open call. If The Rock ever wants to come on Daily Detroit, I'm all for it. I will say, though, that when you talk about that engagement part, I hear what people are saying. On the other hand, things have kind of changed. I don't know about you, but I don't go to the mall very often. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's a lot more possibilities for social media, for video engagement, all that other stuff when you have a much more star-studded and media-savvy group behind you.
Yeah, and I mean, I know the Panthers are growing, and like, again, me personally, I liked that they practiced somewhere where fans could watch them practice. I know at times it's a bit of a distraction for players. Like I know even watching spring practices for like the Tigers or the Pistons or the Lions and the fans are there, they get a little too involved at times to where like the players might pay a bit more attention than they need to, or they might get a little bit rowdy about something happening. So maybe distancing that might help a little bit. But the way that the execs sound and the way that the Panthers sound is, they think that it might reverse itself in the future. This is just kind of the first time because the XFL's people coming over own a bit more than, say, the USFL's people. Now the league is known as the UFL. As a result, they kind of want to do things on a more even playing field, which is more towards the XFL's thing before they kind of ventured out to letting people go back to what it was before. So I understand that. It's a little disappointing, but, you take one small step back to take 5 steps forward. And I think that's what the UFL is trying to do.
Well, feedback as always, dailydetroit@gmail.com. First game, March 30th versus the St. Louis Battlehawks at 4 p.m. Before we let you go, Fletcher, real quick, let's talk about these Pistons moves because, look, the season's just been out of hand, but it seems like the Pistons are doing some things to make adjustments. A couple of highlights on what's been happening lately. What are your thoughts?
So they traded away Marvin Bagley, who I thought they probably should have kept instead of James Wiseman. They traded away Isaiah Livers, who I didn't think he was an NBA player at all. Like I saw him at Michigan and was like, good luck, whoever gets him. And then the Pistons did. Now it's like, oh, yikes. So people were happy to see him gone because they felt he just took up space. For Danilo Gallinari and Mike Muscala, they ended up getting rid of Danilo Gallinari, waiving him to make space, then trading for Simone Fontecchio, who I didn't necessarily like. He came from the Jazz. He had 2 very good games for the Jazz against the Pistons. Everything else seemed kind of to be very average. But with the Pistons, he's excelled pretty well. They made another trade where they traded away Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks, who Alec Burks, I have many conflicted feelings about Alec Burks. He's a guy who can do well on not very good teams. Like I've never seen him do well on winning teams. So for him to go frees up some second unit scoring options and allows other people to kind of get their hands on the ball. And Bojan, while it was great to have him here, having a proven shooter to help, he was a turnstile defensively. And like that's not going to help a young team recover because if you can't defend, all that really does is make things be even as opposed to, maybe you having a positive advantage. And they got back a lot of youth. Evan Fournier, who's not young, but he's a proven NBA veteran. He's kind of there just to provide a veteran presence, maybe some shooting as well. They got Quentin Grimes, who played basketball at Houston with Pistons guard Marcus Sasser. Coach Calvin Sampson, who is at Houston, who used to be a longtime Indiana coach, said Marcus Sasser was the hardest working player he ever had in his program, second to Quentin Grimes. So to have them both who've played together is a good thing. Quentin Grimes adds some defensive grit. He adds some corner three-point shooting. Those things help. They also got Ryan Arcidiacono, who was a really good college player for Villanova. He also has the distinction of being the first player in NBA history to play 20 games and not score a point. So, I mean, you're getting record breakers all around. I mean, some good, some not good. But he's a really good glue guy. He's a guy who is good for your team. He's someone who cares about his teammates, which I know that seems like very small things. But having a team of people that want to be around each other. And look, the Pistons, the season is essentially lost looking at it now. But looking at them now from like a month ago, they're playing hard ball. They recently lost to the Clippers in a game that the ref kind of tilted a bit more one way than the other. And I only say that because 26-7 free throw discrepancy means the whistles are being blown one way and not the other. But had they won that game, it would have been their first 3-game winning streak all season, which means like they're fighting. They didn't lose the game by much. Like it wasn't like they got blown out. Like the game kind of got pushed a bit late because of free throws, but like they're out here balling. Cade Cunningham is back. Jaden Ivey's getting playing time, and of course he's getting playing time. And look, he's flourishing, which is what all the fans have been saying earlier on. Like just let him play, and he'll play well.
Let him cook. Do you think these guys are going to stick around? Is this part of a little bit of an addition to the rebuild, or is this like this season we got to do something?
Fontecchio, yes, as he's not necessarily young. He's 28, but he is someone who can flourish in the role that he's doing. Fournier, probably not, maybe for a year. Mike Muscala has a role, so until his role becomes not needed anymore, then I think he probably will be gone. A few more of the names mentioned. Quentin Grimes, yes. I think Quentin Grimes is here to stay until they decide to get rid of him. The one thing I will say that makes me kind of sad, the trade brought in Shake Milton from the 76ers, who was also on the Timberwolves as well. Quality player, but they traded out Monty Morris, who hometown kid, who I really would have loved to see flourish with the Pistons, but just injuries would not let him do it. And I'm happy for him to go to a team in the Timberwolves that has a chance to make the playoffs and play well. So he gets a chance to try to do something. Would have liked to see him stay on the roster, but also if people find value in you, then, take it. They also got 4 draft picks, all second rounders, all future draft picks, one in the 2024, 2 future and to be named, 1 2030. Some of these years you look at them and you're like, these aren't real years. 2030, that's not a real year. That's like when the Jetsons exist. So they're trying to build.
The faith is shaken by fans, just so you know.
I know Troy Weaver is like managing for his life at this point. Like I know he knows that the rope that he had is like gone, but to see him still trying to build rather than trying to put the fires out, like I appreciate that. I appreciate you're like, well, I'm trying to set the team up for success in the future. Hopefully he's still there for the future, but also if you're not, you'd understand why you're not. I think the future is brighter. I really can't say how bright because right now we're looking at it through like poop covered glasses because they're doing very terrible. But I mean, the same thing I've been saying the past few years for the Pistons is all I want is for them to play hard. If they lose 80 games, 70 games, fine. But if they play hard in all their games and the players grow from it, then they should be okay. And I'll say this. I know you were talking about them getting 10 wins. They're at 8. I think they'll definitely get 10. 15 on the year seems kind of hard because they have a bit of a harder schedule coming up. But 10 wins for sure. Yeah, I'd prefer that, they win 30 or 40 or even 50 or 60. But that's not this team right now. At this point, you're really just trying to win enough games to make sure Cade wants to come back. Because losing a player that all the stars are saying is someone who's on the come up would be a very devastating blow to your organization.
I will say people gave me so much heck for your quick take that Cade might leave. They just could not believe that would be on the board. I'll also say I am glad to be wrong about 10 wins. I'm glad to make changes. I am a fan. I want to see success. I'm 100% okay with being wrong on that.
I mean, to the people who gave you a little bit crap about that, would you want to stay somewhere where you're like continually cratering out? If your contract's up and you could go to a different job where like you might have a better chance of success, wouldn't you want to leave? Like, wouldn't that be something where you're like, you know what? Yeah, I'm good. Like I could make 30 million here. I could make 30 million in like, Florida or Los Angeles or somewhere where the sun comes out consistently and maybe win a few more games too. Like I want him to stay for sure because the city embraces him and the city loves him. And like, I mean this on the positive aspects, not the negative, but like he's like reached the Grant Hill, Chauncey Billups, Ben Wallace status of like, we love this guy dribbling a basketball for us. If the team's not being built around him or the team's not really succeeding, like why would you want to stay?
Fletcher Sharpe, always good to talk to you. Saint FDW on social media.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
And thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Remember to drop 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. Always appreciate the ratings. Thank you to our members, patreon.com/dailydetroit, who help this thing go. With that, I am Jer Stays.
And I'm Fletcher Sharpe.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.